How's everybody else?
Everyone I associate with is thriving in abundance. Limitless.
Hello and welcome. I am Helene and I'm here to give my review of a show I never intended to review, but I was inspired to review this particular show because of the episode where I understood the references that they were making. So I wanted to put my thoughts on record about how they contextualized those references in the format of a sitcom, which was hilarious and dichotomously sad too. And the show is Atlanta, season 3, final season, episode 1-3 slaps. It begins with two men sitting in a boat on a lake fishing at night. And there's a black guy and a white guy. The black guy recalls how he almost drowned in that very lake, and it felt as if someone was pulling him in the lake as he was being saved. The white guy turns to him and tells him that he very well may have been being pulled into the lake because the lake is haunted. And then he goes into the history of that lake, and he draws on some concepts concerning race and how race is manipulated based on resources, and how the town was almost white, right? But the town was a black town that was intentionally flooded by the government, and those who were there self-governed that town, and they thought that they were safe, so they stayed behind, but the government allowed them to drown. And so there's a jump scare, and then this little boy wakes up in class. And then they go into this scene where the teacher confers with the class how they're working to do more for Black History Month. So they gave the class tickets to the sequel to Black Panther. And then they made reference to the viral video of the little boy dancing in a chair with this little boy who woke up from that nightmare dancing on the table and all around the classroom. And he's then been sent to the principal's office. We see the next scene with a mother and apparently an elder gentleman, his grandfather, sitting in front of the principal, and it's obvious they're pathologizing his behavior. And she's telling them, stop calling me down here all the time. Send his ass to detention. Right then, the counselor comes in and suggests that he should be in remedial classes. And the mother's like, he's not dumb. He's an idiot, but he's not dumb. Stop calling me down here and just send him to detention. So the next scene is where she's chastising him, telling him to dance and shooting off dance moves that he's supposed to do. And after she finished making him dance, she then tells him, these white folks is going to kill you if you don't get some common sense. So it seems a bit much until you see the end of the episode. The grandfather then gives 3 half-hearted smacks across the little boy's face. And then the counselor saw this all transpire, so she walks him back and said, I'm going to get you out of there. The next scene is him in his kitchen at home asking, where's the milk? And the mama said, it's spaghetti in there. Heat you up some spaghetti. So he goes to heat himself up some spaghetti, and he sits down and watches television. And as he's watching television, his mama yelled down that he's not supposed to be watching TV. Then they get a call at the door. It's a social worker who is non-black. And before the social worker could get all her spiel out to the mother, the mama was like, you called the police on me? Here, you can have them. And she just fling his ass out the door with some things. Then they take him to a white lesbian couple's home. And the white lesbian couple, when as soon as I saw them, I knew what reference they were making. I'll get to that later. So there's 3 other black children in this home. And he comes into the home and he's like, Loquareeous, that's the child who the story is centered on. So he's like, it's stinking here. The white ladies get to lying about what the stench is about. They are obviously delusional and don't have any sense. She's saying she's going to fry some chicken by putting chicken legs into flour and then putting it in a microwave for 8 minutes. She takes them upstairs, set up where he's going to stay. And they rename the child in the instance. His name is Larry now. And it's obviously they're controlling and they're racist. But it's also obvious that they're in over their heads. So they're farming, they're working the children. The other 3 children do not speak. And Loquareeous is bold and outright about his disgust with the food, how it smells, everything. And then they take the children to a farmer's market. And the children are like mascots, pets. They are the pets, but they treat their dog like the child. Anyway, Loquareeous has on this board at the farmer's market that says free hugs. He sees a police as he's there, a white man, and he takes off this board and runs to him and tells him all that's going on. And the police dismiss it once he sees the parents that he's complaining about. And obviously he's lying and exaggerating because he has 2 white mothers. Anywho, so this dampens Loquareeous' spirit and he's being broken. All the while, the white couple is in over their head when it comes to bills. They're not being able to keep up with their loans, etc. So then somebody called a social worker on them. A black social worker comes to the door and she takes full assessment of what's going on. They're giving the little girl Fatima blueberries to treat her cough. And they're not feeding the children, etc. So the social worker said, don't worry, I'm going to get y'all out of here. So one of the women, the wives of the lesbian couples, suggests that she comes to the back to speak with her about what's really going on. And then the social worker never returns. So at that moment, Larry is broken. So he goes and he just concedes to eating what they're giving him. He ends up going to sleep having a nightmare what happened to the social worker and seeing a jar with her head being pickled in the refrigerator. He wakes up, throws up, and then realizes that the couple is getting all the children together to take a trip somewhere. He asks one of the wives, where are we really going? And they say nothing to him. They pack up and get in the van. The children are laying in the back of the van, communicating through eye blinks with each other. And Loquareeous asks the kids, like, y'all know they finna kill us. And the kids blink back like, duh, yeah, we know it's about to happen. So on the way to what they are about to ultimately do, they stop to let the dog go free and says that to do that for the children would be denying the inevitability of it all. And they basically are complaining about how they got in over their head and why didn't nobody stop them when they was taking out the loans and when they was adopting the kids. Why didn't nobody stop them? And it just shows the excess of whiteness despite the lack of background credentials. But that's not where I'm going to stop at. I'll give my further analysis of it at the end. So then they continue to drive to their destination. And as they're driving, they realize that Loquareeous isn't there and the dog is there underneath the hat that they made Loquareeous wear. And as they realize this, Loquareeous jumps out the back of the van and then they drive the car into the lake. And Loquareeous walks home to his mother's house. And his mother said, so you finally decided to come home? And he said, yeah, this is why he washing the dishes. The first thing he does is to wash the dishes. And then he asks his mama, you got some of that spaghetti left? And the mom was like, yeah, sit down. And he makes himself a bowl of spaghetti and goes to sit down and watch TV. And then it shows the audience through a news report that the other 3 children were found on the side of the road. And then the show ends with Donald Glover's character waking up in a hotel room next to some white woman. And that was the end. So the reference points of this show was Lake Lanier and a relatively recent news report of how there was this black child years ago. And I believe, and this is going to be sad because we've had so many mass protests, but I believe it was during Eric Garner's, this is sad, but Eric Garner's protest where there was a picture that went viral of this little black boy with the similar hat that Loquareeous was made to wear, hugging and crying with a white police officer. And everybody made this little boy out to be a coon, and that the white couple, the white lesbian couple that was his adopted parents, was using him to project this image of solidarity with policemen by having him hug the police and heal the wounds. And everybody had infused their perspective of what that moment was. What this show did was hypothesize a different perspective than the galvanized perspective of the public at the time that that particular incident happened. Because we come to find out later that that very couple that had that little boy ended up driving into a lake and offing the complete family. They offed themselves, that little boy, and his other adopted siblings. Nobody went into details as to why they would do it. Nobody asked any questions, but everybody made this boy out to be some caricature. What also was interesting was how the story of
Lake Lanier. It's a lake in Forsyth County, Georgia, where people go swimming and boating and fishing and do a bunch of other lakey things. But before it was Lake Lanier, it was a town called Oscarville, Georgia. Now, Oscarville was a thriving, predominantly black community with a church, a school, and dozens of homes, until the year 1912, when a very bad thing happened. Oh, two very bad things. In 1912, two black teenagers were accused of rape. They were tried, convicted, and sentenced to death in a single day. And after they were executed, a mob of white men terrorized, drove out, or killed all the black people in the surrounding area. And they did that until the entire black community of Oscarville disappeared. The county went from having over 1,000 black residents in 1912 to 0 in 1920. Black community had been run off. The white people of Forsyth County said, you know what we could use? A big old lake. So they made one, right where the town of Oscarville had just been. They flooded the area and literally covered up the entire town with water.
Was portrayed in this particular episode, in this particular show. We know of many black towns through
Alabama. It was once a thriving black community with a black college, the first black railroad, and literally hundreds of family homes. Today, it's Lake Martin. Let me introduce you to a place called Central Park. Central Park used to have a black community in it called York Hill. But the city of New York destroyed York Hill so that they could build the Central Park Reservoir. When the residents of York Hill were kicked out of their homes, they fled to another black community nearby called Seneca Village. And then a few years later, New York destroyed Seneca Village too, so that they could build Central Park on top of it. They tried to erase black communities, places like Henry and McKee Islands, which is now located under Lake Guntersville in Alabama, and Vanport, Oregon, which is now located under Delta Park. And all of these towns, which are currently literally underwater.
The states of America that have been flooded. There are many black towns throughout the United States of America and United States of America's history that have been burned based on just the fact that they were black and they were prosperous at a rate that was far outpacing their neighbors, and they would take some arbitrary reason to justify flooding these towns and bombing and setting ablaze these towns. And usually it would be predicated on the chastity or the virtue of some random white woman that gave them excuses to exact revenge on these spaces. In the beginning of this episode, the white guy, when explaining the history of the town, he went into this perspective that you can pay to be white. People pay to be white. The problem is there is no amount of money in the paradigm of white supremacy where blackness gets to pay to be white, up until the point in which you offend the tenet of why white supremacy exists. White supremacy is a religion. And when you offend anyone's religion with the evidence that their religion is rooted on something that is false, they do not take the evidence of it being false as true. What they do is burn the evidence. And what the burning of these black towns were, and the flooding of these black towns was the destroying the evidence that white supremacy is a false idea and rooted on stupidity. And there is no amount of money that allows for black people to pay their way into whiteness, because white supremacy needs the polarity to exact itself against, to show in which it is not. It cannot be black because it is white. If black people are sin, it offends the tenets of this belief system that pervades the global community. So the Lake Lanier reference was interesting in this episode as well. What I also found interesting was the school to prison pipeline processes that was shown throughout the episode. How, yes, this little boy was being extra and he would not stop, but the extent to which it was punished was to force him into remedial classes because he danced in the class. And to see this as by being non-black, people were in this episode playing into whiteness even though they weren't white, but they were putting themselves into proximity to whiteness to advantage themselves. And by doing that, it allows themselves, as the white guy in the beginning said, the more you are able to be viewed as white, the less you see the blood of others as your own, the traumas of others as your own, because you are dehumanizing that which is not white. Right? And the further you can get away from it, the more you can get access to the privileges of the paradigm. And I thought that was interesting. And I also found it hilarious the way they parodied the Black Panther advertisement that went on with the first Black Panther. All the while, a lot of stuff in this was sad, and it was on face value harsh. In reality, a lot of it was hilarious in the way it expressed itself, and it did give humanity to a lot of stories in which we, the public, both black and white, play into white supremacy and also dismiss the backstory in an effort to satisfy our personal biases. And to the ethos, tell the future I said so.